Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. The debate as to whether government should step in to caution consumers of petroleum products because of the expected hikes in prices will just not go away. For some, government can still do more in these times to caution us. While for some, the argument is that if these taxes are removed from petroleum products, it could create a big hole in government's revenue. But what is the best way out? What is the current state of the country's energy and power sector? On PM Express, you're looking at petroleum prices and the state of the country's energy and power sector. The Deputy Minister of Energy, Andre Japamaisa, who is here to engage us on all these issues. And what is the way forward? This PM Express Business Edition. We'll take a short break and be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. As you look at prices of petroleum products, what should government be doing, and also the state of our energy and power sector. We are grateful to have the Deputy Minister of Energy with us here, Andre Japamaisa, with us. Thank you so much for welcoming us to your office, and we are grateful for us to engage you on all these subject areas.
It's indeed my pleasure.
And how has been power like? I mean, or handling this sector in terms of the energy ministry?
Well, it's been challenging. I guess that the issues are pretty much clear. When I was appointed by His Excellency the President, was at the time, indeed, and the appointment I make reference to post-swearing in, was when the outages that had been advertised by the ECG and GRIDCO with respect to the works that were going on in Pokwase had just been put out, and so the talk really was that Dumso had come back, and so we needed to take our time to explain to people, the Ghanaian public, that no, Dumso as we know it is not what we're experiencing today, because what pertained between 2012 and 2016 was a situation where we just didn't have the money to buy alternative fuel to power our plants when the West African gas pipeline force majeure issue occurred. And so we were saddled with a situation where we went into a prolonged power outage for 4 years and change. But this Dumso, if you like, is really as a result of works that were ongoing at the Pokwase and Kaswa bulk supply points. Indeed, yesterday His Excellency the President commissioned the Pokwase bulk supply point, and that it was important that because of the nature of the work, that the power is taken off for humans who were working on those lines to be able to do the interconnection. Of course, our friends in the opposition doubted us, which is not surprising, because obviously it's exciting to have a situation that mimics what it is that your era, visited upon the people. But clearly, my minister was categorical that this really is a matter of dooming and CCA, which he termed as doom CC.
I see.
And indeed, we all can attest to the fact that yes, we had to take it off for a bit, but post the work's completion, those situations are no longer with us. Over time, you would see some localized outages.
Because that was what I was coming to, Honorable, that do I get the understanding from you that as we speak from now, all other things being equal, we shouldn't be expecting any Dumso, and Dumso, as we know as consistent or scheduled power outages, is over?
That has been over since 2017.
Wow, but we just some would say we experienced.
Yeah,
we did experience.
That's why
some
I'm explaining
outages
to you that what pertained in the past was really because we couldn't afford to buy fuel to power plants. Because if you look at the data, the installed capacity, generation capacity pre-2015, okay, was sufficient to meet our power needs. And so question then is, Why is it that we had sufficient generation capacity, but we were unable to provide electricity to our people? That's a question that is relevant. And I'm saying to you that if you look at the incremental power that was added post 2015 with the emergency power plants that were contracted, you would see, and permit me, I will show you a graph that was prepared by the World Bank, taking cognizance of the data available, to show that it was only in 2020 that the incremental power that was added from 2015, we consumed only a little bit of it. So between 2015 and 2020, all the power that was added was not something that we're consuming. And so I'm saying to you that that in itself tells a story. That it wasn't the case that we didn't have the power to provide, but we couldn't pay for the fuel.
But now do we have,
absolutely,
have we paid for all the
that
fuel?
Between 2017 to date, government has made the resources available to pay for the fuel to power our plants. And so that's why Dumso has been over since 2017. In 2021, the issue that I was making reference to respect to the Pokwase and Kaswa. Yesterday, the president commissioned the biggest bulk supply point in Ghana, the most ultra-modern. And we all, indeed the residents of Pokwase, represented by their MP, attested there that after those works were done, the situation has improved significantly. And I'm saying to you that yes, because we are continuing to renew our transmission network, we are renewing our ECG system is being, which indeed and in fact is some 50 years plus old. There ought to be some new systems that are being built. That is going to continue. And at every point where that program is ongoing and the need arises for power to be taken off for those interconnections to be done, that will be done. But that's regular maintenance works that would necessarily have to be done on the transmission line. That is not the situation that we experienced between 2012 and 2016, where obviously we had generation capacity but could not provide electricity for our people.
But these maintenance works, I stand to be educated on how these things work, might not straddle over 1 week or even 2 weeks or even a month, if I should say.
Yes, but that's obviously not 4 years, which is what we endured between 2012 and 2016.
But Honorable, if I get the understanding from you that as far as you're concerned from your government perspective and what you're privy to, you've been able to provide the required financing for these power companies to provide fuel and the necessary support for the systems, that we may not get to that time again of that sustained power outages that is coming from lack of funds to buy fuel.
No doubt in my mind at all. Because the president is clear that if you want to drive an economy that is based on industrialization, then it's an absolute imperative that you make power available. And so making power available to the consumer to drive our industrial agenda is non-negotiable. And so that's why consistently between 2017 till date, we have the kind of situation that we have that ensures that power is available for the consuming public, save for the situations where it becomes absolutely necessary to take it off to do the requisite maintenance works that are necessary to make power available.
So we've addressed the problem about fuel. What about the state of infrastructure as well? It's more of a continuum.
Absolutely.
Listen, we've gotten very far, George, with respect to the provision of the required infrastructure. So listen, it won't be a problem where, like, for more than 3 or 4 months, we now have to come up with a schedule to put off power in people's houses.
No, not at all, because, for instance, Pokwase, now that the works are complete, there's no basis for sustained power outage in that enclave. Kaswa is being worked on. It's not being completed. Some works have been done to move it from the high tension to the supply point and further integration into ECG system. When they get to that point, they will have to take it off to do the integration. Okay,
for
that
like
will require
2 weeks.
But even if I'm not in a position
not boxing you down to time.
No,
sorry,
not,
but
not a problem at all.
Yeah.
At the right time, the technical people who are doing the work would advise the ministry, and based on that, a schedule will be put out.
But there have been some pockets of lights out in some areas. I'll say for East Legon.
No, that's what I'm saying, that electricity transmission distribution comes with its own attendant local challenges, faults.
So let's
nobody can predict.
Localized.
Absolutely. So those issues can come up. But it is not the case that this is a national program that is being run that is intended to, if you like, ration electricity across the country, and so a program is then put out that then makes electricity distribution go by that program. I'm saying that we're working on the system continuously. ECG and GRICO are working. But the nature of the works that they are carrying out is such that it will not lead to a national power outage schedule, but localized ones that are necessary to fix the problem within those specific localities.
Let's look at the number of people who are within this space providing power. And I remember there's been always an issue about quotes oversupply. Have you been able to deal with that challenge? Because oversupply comes with cost to government. How are you doing? What has been done with respect to having too many providers in this space when it comes to power supply?
Well, there's not much that you can do. You can attempt to renegotiate some of them. And
maybe that's what I wanted to find out. What's the state of renegotiating some of these contracts?
I don't have the present update on where some of those renegotiations have gotten to. But bear in mind that based on contracts that you've signed, private entities have gone out there to source funding to come and do a project. And so when they complete, they themselves have their own obligations to their funders. And so it is a little difficult when you call them around the table and say, look, you ought to relook at your prices. But there's a lot that you can do going forward, because indeed and in fact, yes, we have excess power today, but that doesn't mean that we're going to have excess power forever.
Problem is the cost of that.
Well, that's why I'm saying that you can do something about it going forward.
So what are you doing, Honorable?
Yeah, so what we have decided to do, for instance, is that we're not going to buy power beyond a certain price going forward. We are not going to issue government guarantees, PCOAs going forward. We are not going to do take or pay obligations going forward. We are going to buy power. We are not going to give fuel for power producers going forward. So these are mechanisms that have been put in place to ensure that going forward, when the need arises for us to contract more power, which we would. Why I say so is that demand keeps growing. Okay, and so if you're planning your generation to meet the growing demand, then you ought to know the time that you start the conversations, the negotiations, to ensure that by the time that the present supply outstrips demand, you have sufficient enough power to then meet the demand forecast. So we're working to ensure that going forward, all these agreements that we sign that have been an albatross on the heads of government for the past 5 years, for which we're paying in some cases for power that we do not need nor consume. That's not recur going forward.
So if I want some clarification, because I get from you that going forward, that could be then new agreement. But what about the existing agreements that we're still supposed to make some commitments to that as well?
Yeah, those commitments are being met, because that's the obligation.
So it means that nothing can be done about the take-or pay. So for instance, if you signed someone signed a 10-year power contract with a firm, a take-or pay, government is still being obliged by the law to comply with that.
Absolutely. That's the rule. Sanctity of contract, isn't it? And so you are essentially bound by the contract, regardless of whether the terms were onerous or that they were unfavorable. The presumption is that you went in there with your eyes open, negotiated, and got the best deal that, according to you, you got. And so it's a very difficult situation. I'm not aware of any of the contractors who have agreed to vary the terms of their agreement.
Isn't that possible? That is, someone say that is your space, Honorable. I mean, as a lawyer,
but that's what I'm
anything
saying,
be done about these contracts?
You can only renegotiate.
Is that possible?
And that requires the consent of both parties. And I'm saying that if the contractor puts his financing obligations before you, the numbers based on the agreement that you sign has then made him make some contractual commitments. Then it becomes difficult in getting them to go and renegotiate their funding terms to enable them meet whatever renegotiation terms that you want to put across. So it's a difficulty. But what we've done is to suspend the onboarding of some of those power purchase agreements that were signed in the past, put a moratorium for new power purchase agreements, freeze the implementation of some of them, and then gradually, as the demand grows, as we plan our forecast going forward, then we can get some of those new ones that were done to come on board.
Did I get a point that more of government up in arms on these issues?
No, it's not a matter of government up in arms, but that's the reality of the economic system that you play in. That's really the rules. That if we say we are a law-abiding country, we believe in rule of law, then what the law imposes on you, what your contractual obligations impose on you, you can renegotiate, but that cannot be something that you can push down the throat of anybody. There has to be a willing party on the other side who then looks at the entire mix and comes to say that, well, I agree, I'm going to reduce my charges by a certain percentage. But think about it and put yourself in the shoes of the private investor, and let's see whether indeed you can get some traction on that front.
Honorable, I'll be coming back to you to get your thoughts about how we go about this to ensure that it also doesn't affect us in the future when we are trying to bring in more partners on board to invest in our energy and power sector, and also the whole argument about our debts going forward, and even the push for green energy and what is the future for us as well. This is a PM Express Business Edition as I engage the Deputy Minister of Energy, Andre Japamaisa, on the issues about energy, power, and prices of petroleum products. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the energy, power sector, and prices of petroleum products. What is government doing about all these things? And going forward, are we assured that indeed localized or sustained power outages are over, according to what the Deputy Minister is telling us? Maybe it's a thing of the past. That Andre Japamaisa explain all these things to us. Welcome back to PM Express Business. And thank you, Honorable, for explaining some things to us. Let's look at the issue about debt. Have we made progress in that area? Because in the past, we've been told that it's about energy sector problems. We're about money, and the debt. I know that steps are being taken, but have we made some significant progress that going forward, it won't be a challenge again?
Well, we are implementing the Energy Sector Recovery Program, which clearly spells out what the debt burden will become in the event that we don't do anything. And so I'm sure you've heard that there's some projection that the do nothing scenario puts out at some $12.5 billion by 2023. But of course, we are not putting up the do nothing scenario. We're actually working to ensure that the energy sector recovery plan that we have put in place is implemented fully. Some phased approach is what the document outlines. We are working on it to ensure that all the things that we need to do, the Project Light negotiations still ongoing to ensure that the burden in that space is significantly reduced. But then again, you see, oftentimes people say that, well, it's your call, so fix it. But it's important to situate some of these things in context, okay, and to then clearly identify what really the issues are, so that we can all then work to find the solutions to the problem. Yes, it's government's duty to find the solutions to the problems. But then I was having a conversation with some people this morning, and they were saying that, well, perception is everything. And I disagree, because you can have a certain perception that doesn't tell the entire story. And so it's important to put out in full the information to then inform people's perception, you know, in a certain direction. It was just reckless, the kinds of agreements that were signed in the past. That's just the truth. Such that when we were on break, I showed you a document which shows pre-2015 installed capacity and post-2015 additional capacity. And if you look at the peak demand curve between 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, all the power purchase agreements that were signed, we never consumed even 1 megawatt of it. It was only in 2020 that we've consumed about 5 megawatts of all the capacity that had been added onto the grid. But we needed to keep paying for, year on year, all the costs that were associated with those power purchase agreements that had been signed. Such that today, in 2020, the shortfall in ECG's revenue, as opposed to the cost that it incurs in ensuring that power gets to our homes, is in excess of $1.1 billion. That debt has to be paid, and it's cumulative. Okay? And so then you hear arguments being made that, for instance, scrap all the taxes and levies on petroleum prices.
We'll be coming to
you
that.
know, I'm sure that when the Minister of Finance read the budget in March of this year, some of those taxes and levies that are being imposed on petroleum is being used to service debt that the power sector has had to deal with. And so if you listen to especially the government that, when they were in power, contracted all these obligations that has to be paid for, turn it around to suggest that scrap all taxes and levies, then one begins to wonder whether they are being altruistic in their comments, or that it's just playing to the gallery just to create a certain impression, to exploit, of course, in a deceptive manner for political gain.
But Honorable, some will say that government is managing the situation right now. What measures have you taken, or what measures have you taken to ensure that going forward we don't get back to this state again? Absolutely.
Those are the kinds of things that I'm telling you, that the Energy Sector Recovery Plan that I believe was approved in 2019 is what we're working with. As the framework that we're working with to ensure that all these obligations that are in the energy sector space is cleaned up. We've rolled out new rules going forward on how it is that our contracting process is going to be. And I'm positive that with the comprehensive implementation of the plan, we would be able to get out of the woods and put our energy sector on sound footing. That's exactly what my minister is leading together with the finance ministry to ensure that that happens.
There's a proposal or some argument about sharing the cost, and then it comes back to the consumer as well. What is government's position on the cost sharing argument here? And it dovetails into paying of realistic tariffs.
Realistic tariffs in the electricity space.
In the electricity space for both consumers, industries, and businesses. What is government position on that? That do you subscribe?
So you see, in the past, and that's what the regime is as we speak. Save that my minister has indicated quite clearly the need for us to revise the entire tariff structure within the electricity consumption space, because it is the case that the more you consume, the more you pay. So there's a band system where, say, from 1 unit of kilowatt hour that you consume to 50 kilowatts, you pay 2 Ghana cedi per kilowatt hour. The very moment you move to 51 to 100, then you pay 5 cedi per kilowatt hour from 0 through to 100. That's clearly punitive. And so people who are high consumers of electricity, and turns out to be the services sector and the production sector, tend to pay more because they then get into higher bands. And so my minister has advocated, for instance, that look, if you go to the fuel station, regardless of whether you drive a Tico or a Land Cruiser, the price for a liter of fuel is the same. So why can't we implement that in the electricity tariff structure, so that regardless of how much units of electricity you consume, you pay per unit of electricity? That immediately changes the dynamics for high consumers of electricity. In any event, you have excess power that you need people to consume. And so why don't you create an environment that then enables people to consume more electricity? I guess that in the past, because of the shortage in the distribution space, the rationale was to discourage consumption of electricity. And so the tariff structure was made such that it punished high consumers of electricity for the as opposed to the low consumers. But the dynamics have changed.
And this proposal has been made to those who matter
of
to
course,
work on it.
And then the PURC, I'm sure you are aware, is going through the tariff review regime. And appropriately, when their recommendations are ready, they will table it for the appropriate approvals to be obtained. But I think that that's fair.
Do you think that people should pay for more when they consume more? There should be a standard tariff structure for everyone.
I'm saying that my minister is advocating for a uniform tariff structure per unit, just as pertains at the fuel pump, where regardless of whether you buy 100 gallons at a go or 50 gallons or 5 gallons, the price per gallon is the same, regardless of the quantity that you consume.
Knowing this economy and government controlling this economy and all the rest, some would say that you might have your way with this proposal, of course.
But assuming that we have our way, which the law does not allow us to, would it not be beneficial for the productive sector to have a competitive tariff that then enables them to produce more, employ more? So as far as I'm concerned, it only makes sense.
What have the producers said about this proposal?
Well, I do not know what their feedback is, because it's the PURC that's supposed to engage the stakeholder consultations. But having run an organization myself before, I do not think that this proposal would be objected to by anybody, because it only makes sense and immediately would make our productive sector competitive. Bear in mind that we have the AFCTA that we are dealing with as we speak, which means that we in Ghana have access, to the entire African market, quota free, and all the attendant benefits that comes with it. And so it is important that as we position ourselves to be more competitive, that our competitiveness reflects all sectors, including the cost of production, which electricity is a huge component.
I mean, previously we had PURC and even some other government agencies give us the signal that all other things being equal, we should prepare ourselves for some review in the tariff structure, possibly some hikes. Is government hearing the same song that we are hearing outside?
I haven't seen any document from PURC that suggests anybody bracing himself for hikes. The truth of the matter is that the law enjoins them to go through a certain process, take input from the power producers, distributors, of course, water and all the other services that their jurisdiction covers. Post that, they need to do some extensive stakeholder consultation before they submit their final report. And my understanding is that that process is ongoing. And so I do not want to dwell in the realm of speculation and conjecture stuff that really I do not have any basis to speak to.
The producers have been pushing for realistic tariffs. Do your government share in their pain since you are a shareholder in some of these companies?
Well, I believe that the producers, distributors ought to be paid tariff that then enables them to continue to provide the service. And so what that tariff is, PURC has to make a determination based on representations that they make. But then again, are they themselves meeting the service level benchmarks that they are required to? So that, for instance, if technical and commercial losses is in the region of some 48%, then question is, whose inefficiencies ought to be paid for by the consumer? If your technical and commercial losses are reduced significantly to below 10%, and clearly everybody sees the efficiencies within which you are executing your assignment, then I believe that a case can then be made for whatever shortfalls to be borne by the consumer. And so essentially what I'm saying is that that's why there's a regulatory body that then makes a determination of all the inputs that the producers, the distributors make vis-a-vis the interest of the consumer to arrive at a tariff that in their best judgment ought to be what is applicable.
Some have said that there's always been a chicken and egg argument. Which one comes first? Paying the realistic tariffs or ensuring that all those technical losses are addressed? And I'm pushing it because I also see government
because I'm not a soothsayer,
a shareholder.
I'm not a soothsayer to know whether the chicken or the egg should come first. So I'm not sure whether
but we need something to come first.
But of course,
technical
that's why it's called
realistic tariffs.
That's why it's called a chicken or egg situation.
Yeah.
It is exactly what it is. Chicken and egg.
Technical
but I guess that
I
guess that we can look at it both ways, okay, and graduate it such that you can set benchmarks that look, we can increase the tariff by so much percentage, but whilst we do so, you ought to ensure that you bring your technical and commercial losses below a certain benchmark. Post review, then some additional, so it has to be a give and take, you know, and that's exactly what the PURC does. And so I have confidence in the competencies of the people who work in that organization, and I'm sure that by the time that they come out with their recommendations for tariff adjustments, we will all receive it in good faith as having been a result of some work that clearly represents the interest of both the consumers and the producers.
There's one institution that plays a very critical role in all this whole power production chain to us consumers, and it's ECG. And I also want to get some clarity from you that what is government's position going forward on ECG in terms of ownership, running it efficiently and ensure that it becomes the state-of-the-art company that you're all looking forward to?
Well, I guess that for now, the mandate is with the board. And I recall that at their inauguration, my minister charged them quite clearly to, as it were, ensure that they bring ECG back to profitability. They sought some support by way of some task force that would help in their revenue generation effort through collections. That task force was inaugurated by my minister a couple of months ago. They are out there working. My understanding is that ECG's revenue has increased by some 40 million CD per week, following the work of the task force. And so we're seeing some traction there. Only yesterday I was told that in the past they were collecting the region of some 105 million. Now they're in the region of 140, 150 million. So we're seeing some traction. But that in itself would not be the entirety of the scope of works that needs to be done there. It's surprising that at some engagement between the minister and workers of ECG, both senior and junior staff, was revealing that they themselves admit that even though PDS essentially brought nothing at the time that they commenced, their performance was better. And so question is it the case that they themselves desire for some private sector participation in the distribution space? But that's a conversation that I believe would take place at the highest level.
Yeah.
My minister has advocated that he believes that the last mile, which is the distribution and revenue collection mile, because ECG themselves have piloted some SBU, special business unit, in Ashanti region and I believe the central region, where those units are then taxed with specific service level indicators, and the performance from those pilots clearly support the need for some private sector intervention at the last mile.
So is government going to push?
It's a conception stage as we speak. That's where it is, and the conversation is still ongoing. And at the appropriate time, when it is completely developed, I've heard the talk of the need to introduce boundary metering into the distribution space, so that whatever units of electricity go within a certain catchment area, the people who are responsible for that catchment area ensure that they generate the requisite revenue to pay for those. So there's a lot that is
but all these arguments and things that you've explained to me seem to suggest that the way to go is privatization of ECG. And is government going to pursue that?
Well, I'm not in a position to confirm whether that is the policy direction, because that's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm saying to you that some of the conversations that I'm privy to, which hasn't been formalized or, if you like, developed to even the cabinet level, because whatever it is that the ministry proposes has to go to cabinet for approval. And if it requires parliamentary approval, has to go to parliament. We are not at that stage yet. But I'm privy to conversations about boundary metering, about SBUs, about last mile private participation. The extent hasn't been firmed up. That's why I said that it's still a conversation that is ongoing. And when those conversations are firmed up, I'm sure that you'll be one of the first people.
I'll be knocking on your doors to get
know
those,
where we are. And of course, I mean, it's a transparent process. It's an open process, and the good people of this country will be duly informed of what it is that government is thinking on doing going forward, so that we can bring the requisite efficiencies that we require in to the distribution space.
In your earlier submission, you're talking about the justification or not for whether it is right for these taxes on petroleum products to be removed or not. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll get more details on removing taxes on petroleum products. Is government just being insensitive, or they can do something about the current challenge that you and I are going through as consumers. It's PM Express Business Edition as you talk about the energy and power sector and prices of petroleum products. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the energy, power, and arguments or push for some taxes on petroleum products to be removed. I'm engaging the Deputy Minister of Energy, Andre Japa Maisa, about what government is doing or what's government thoughts on all these arguments going around. And Honorable, why is the difficulty in clearly suspending some taxes on petroleum products? It becomes like a big issue for government.
I don't think that it was a difficulty between 2017 and 2021. Government has suspended and withdrawn funds from the petroleum stabilization levy up to the tune of 510 million. Indeed, the recent directive that His Excellency the President issued to the Finance Ministry to zero out the stabilization levy for the next 2 months in itself would result in another 129 or so million cedis of relief, bringing it to a total of 663 between 2017 to date. And so it cannot be said that it is a difficulty for government to zero out or suspend or even reduce some petroleum taxes that then brings relief to the people. The question really is to what extent? Because as I've indicated to you, government has done some relief in that space.
In the past.
But earlier on I was making a point that if the political opposition makes a call that take away all taxes and levies, and then don't suggest what alternative revenue streams that ought to be deployed to meet the critical expenditure items that are also contained in the budget. Bear in mind that petroleum taxes and levies, apart from those that are specific to some items, okay, so primary distribution margin is for a specific item, fuel marking margin, bust margin. Those taxes and levies constitute about 11 to 12% of the total revenue of the state. Those revenues are intended to fund expenditures including building of roads, schools, hospitals, and all that. And so if the political opposition suggests that suspend 11% of the total revenue of the state, are they then also suggesting that those critical expenditures that those revenues are intended to fund ought to be suspended?
But Honorable, don't we have any...
Hold on.
Yeah.
You see, so I want to let you know the mischief. So then you flip the coin and ask that when that political opposition came into office, total taxes and levies on petroleum products were in the region of some 28 pesos. That political opposition increased the taxes and levies on petroleum to 168 or 69. And those taxes and levies have moved to 190 today. 30%. As opposed to 283% when they were in government. Then question is, are they being sincere, honest with the issues?
But no, someone said that those are past. You are now managing the space.
No, that's why I said context is always important.
Okay.
It's important to situate all these matters in context. Otherwise, I wouldn't go back. So then you ask them, so what was the value of your increasing taxes and levies from 28 pesos to the 169? And they will tell you that they had to use it for EFGHI expenditure. And then you ask them that, oh, so those EFGH expenditure have all gone away. They have failed to exist. And of course, they will have a difficulty in providing an answer. But I'm saying that, yes, it is a duty of government to manage through a balancing act of its total revenues and expenditures. It is the duty, responsibility, which we admit and accept, of government to provide relief. And you recall when the COVID hit, government provided relief, water, electricity, feeding to people who, because of the pandemic, were unable to make ends meet. You heard the kinds of things.
We understand that.
No, hold on. You recall the kinds of things that they said.
Yeah.
You recall?
Some of them, Honorable.
You don't recall all of them?
I recall some of them, not all of them.
Yeah. So that's the nature. And should that be the conversation? I'm prepared, and I believe that the finance ministry is prepared to look again at whether indeed the bust margin, and I've heard advocacy from civil society, BDC, the chamber, and COPEC, make a case why they think that a certain margin.
So the discussion is going between the Ministry of Finance to look at the possibility of reviewing some levies.
Indeed, I mentioned to Senior Hosi, whom I was on a program with at Joy, that you are a member of the advisory board of the Ministry of Energy. Table these issues, and as far as I'm concerned, to the extent that they are constructive, why not?
So government will look on it as long as it won't have serious impact on our
I'm saying
levels.
that there has to be a balance. Government, this 510 million that in the past has been given, an additional 120 plus million that would have to be done away with between November and December when it's rolled out, obviously could have funded some expenditure items. But in the spirit of providing relief, government made those funds available to pay for ensuring that the prices are stabilized. I'm saying that that is a first step. Depending on how the prices at the world market shapes up, depending on how the exchange rate behaves, it's entirely possible that government may have to introduce new set of reliefs. So
it's possible. Some would say that
consistently, that's what the government has done. Consistently.
And also, if I get from your engagement in the Ministry of Finance, if it's possible also to waive some levies,
absolutely,
they are going to do it before the year.
In fact, the budget is being prepared as we speak.
Should expect
you and I don't know but of course, if it's necessary,
because the argument is that
I'm saying that you see, but I've demonstrated to you that that saying is false. I've given you the figures. I'll give you the document.
So consumers should be assured that things are being worked on that will bring reliefs and even waive some levies on it.
If it was within my power to make these commitments off the cuff of my head, I'm sure
I'm just saying that
I'm saying to you that these things take analysis. It's the Ministry of Finance that does the analysis. And I'm saying to you that the Ministry of Finance, based on the analysis that has been done, government has taken an action. You may argue it's not enough. And I'm saying that whilst you are arguing that those are not enough and that government should do more, let's not lose sight of the fact that those revenues are also intended to fund certain critical expenditures for our own benefit. And so our expectation ought to be situated within that context. And so trust government to manage those expectations in a manner that does not jeopardize those critical services that we all need, because it has to be paid for through a certain expenditure. But that doesn't mean that when the need arises for some more to be done, as I've demonstrated to you that government has done in the past, that will be done, because that's the nature of His Excellency the President's government. That a response clearly to the sentiments of the people, but in a responsible manner, just so that the economy is not collapsed.
Well, no,
that's not the point that I'm making.
As we try and wrap up on this discussion and bring this curtain on this issue, I mean, also final one on the exploration and the oil sector as well. What is being done to ensure that we own a substantial stake in this sector and ensure that in terms of capital outflow, we retain lots within this country? But
that's why we are having a conversation about the ACA and AGM.
What is the process as we speak right now?
Well, the independent assessment has been done by Bank of America Securities. And so we're going to go into the negotiation led by the Ministry of Finance and Energy
to buy at the price
and GMPC to negotiate. You see, that's the thing that I always say, that the fact that certain benchmark has been indicated for purposes of discussion doesn't make it final.
We could go lower than that.
Absolutely. Because that's the entire purpose of the exercise that the Ministry of Finance was mandated to do. That yes, we've gotten some indication based on some valuation that the players, GMPC and the AKAGM have done. Go to Parliament, seek a mandate to go and negotiate, not exceeding those indications. But that doesn't mean that you don't do an assessment. That assessment would be done.
And ensure that
based on which we then go and sit around the table that, hey, guys, these figures that you provided, we think that based on XYZ, this is how much we are offering to pay. It's up to ACA to accept or reject, and for government of Ghana to take a decision whether to proceed or not. But I'm saying that we ourselves admit that it's important that we have a greater stake in these fields. So if an opportunity presents itself, just like we have sought to increase our stake in the Jubilee and 10, following Anadako's sale to Cosmos, okay, to increase our stake by some 7%. That's exactly what government is going to do
going forward.
Absolutely. Because the global exploration and production space is changing because of the drive towards carbon neutrality. And can we risk our assets being stranded? When you say it, then I hear some of my friends say, hey, what are you talking about? But
do you have the financial muscle to do that? That's where the problem is.
This is the sovereign Republic of Ghana. If we have to look for the money like we look to fund other critical needs, I'm sure we are in a position to find the money.
Honorable, in a minute, what's the status of these ENI and then the other Springfield? Are we going to defend our case in London?
Oh, we've already filed our responses.
When was that done?
Oh, it was done by the Attorney General's office.
And has there been a hearing?
I coordinated the ministries and these agencies' responses and sent it to the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General. We have a solid case.
Hearing date?
It's early days because the arbitration process
could take a while. But are you optimistic that based on what you've laid forward?
I've just told you that we have a solid case.
Come out as victors.
Solid. Because the law is on our side. The former Minister of Energy who issued the directives did not air at all. And indeed, as I speak to you, ENI themselves are engaging Springfield in the background, negotiating. Yet they've taken us to arbitration. Oh, His Excellency the President has indicated our willingness to pursue it, which we would. Because Ghana is open for business. And we welcome FDIs. Okay? But our laws would be respected.
Indeed, our lost respected Honorable, thank you so much for your time. This has been PM Express Business Edition, engaging the Deputy Minister of Energy, Andre Jepamaisa, on issues of petroleum pricing, energy and power. And I know the debate will still go on in your homes and offices about what government is doing or what should government be doing, or maybe they can do better than what they're doing to protect consumers and consumers out there. It has been PM Express Business Edition as you looked at the energy, power and pricing of petroleum products. My name is George Yafe. Have a great day.